What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? D-backs and Dodgers have been going back and forth, but can the D-backs complete a series split with a victory on Monday?
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas, multimedia journalist, and I'm a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial on NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, we'll be talking about the D-backs going for the series split, the rotation looking a little shaky, and we'll potentially update the belief meter. Thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. All right. Let's get into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. Let's talk about this Dodgers versus D-backs series because it's been incredible to watch through the first 3 games. D-backs lose game 1. It was a crazy back and forth. D-backs score 4 runs in the 9th to potentially and try to make the comeback. They lose by 1 run in that game. Game number 2, more madness. I mean, those first 2 games, the offense went off in those first couple innings. The back and forth nature between those 2 teams. D-backs, again, tried to win game number 2. 8-6, they lose. They had their opportunities, but in the end, they couldn't do enough. And then finally, Sunday's game, though, 14-3, D-backs win, blow out the LA Dodgers. And so, despite the D-backs being 2 games down in the series, 2-1, the D-backs are outscoring the Dodgers in this series. You lose game 1 by 1, you lose game 2 by 2, and then you win game 3 by 11 runs. D-backs are currently leading this series by run differential, but that does not matter. What matters is actually winning the game, and the D-backs will have an opportunity to split this series with the Dodgers in that finale on Monday, and the D-backs can really use it. You look at the NL West standings, D-backs 5 games back of the Dodgers, and this could be a perfect opportunity for the D-backs to take the head-to-head tiebreaker over the Dodgers for the rest of the month, going into the postseason, and just set yourself up better for potentially taking the division or at least being in the mix for that, best record in Major League Baseball, as the D-backs are still potentially in the mix for getting one of those first round buys. The D-backs, they still need a lot to go their way. As we just said, 5 games back of the Dodgers, but they're not out of being one of the top 2 seeds in the National League. They're 5 games back of the Dodgers. They're 3.5 games back of the Phillies. But of course, if they want one of those 2 seeds, you're going to have to win your division. And so it's all really coming down to tomorrow's game potentially. D-backs chances of winning the NL West, D-backs chances of at least getting a bye probably comes down tomorrow. Maybe the number 1 spot in the wild card doesn't come down tomorrow because the D-backs and Padres still play 2 more series. And so if the D-backs lose Monday, they can probably kiss the NL West goodbye, as they would be 6 games back. Could probably kiss a first round bye goodbye, as the D-backs would also be 6 games back. And so the game tomorrow, so important for the D-backs. If they truly want a first-round bye, get a little bit of rest in the postseason, especially with all your guys injured, your rotation not looking the best right now. If you want one of those buys, tomorrow's game is so critical for you to win because you basically take yourself out of the division race if you can't win Monday against the LA Dodgers, but you'll at least still be right there, potentially in the driver's seat for the top wildcard spot in the National League. But I would much rather have one of those buys if I'm the Arizona Diamondbacks, especially looking at the health of this team currently. We just lost Lourdes Gurriel as well in this game on Sunday with a little calf tightness. Not too sure what that means for him long term. Hopefully it's not a serious injury, but this is a team that has been playing great baseball over the last couple of months, but maybe they've been putting too much pressure on themselves. Maybe they're overworking themselves because they were struggling for so much. 10 games below 500 at one point. They've had a lot of work to climb out, and sometimes putting in all that work to climb out the basement, it hurts you on the back end. And maybe that's what we're seeing with the injuries right now as Gurriel goes down. And so that's why I feel like this potential buy that the D-backs could get could be so important, because if you tell me the D-backs get extra rest going to the postseason, I'm not one of those guys that feel like the D-backs will be rusty coming out of a bye. I would not be worried about the D-backs at all. With the way they've been swinging the bat, I would not lose much confidence that taking a few days off would mess up the rhythm of this offense. I think this team could actually benefit from getting a little bit of rest entering the postseason. So tomorrow's game, super critical against the LA Dodgers. And so far, what's been really fun to see is like this back and forth nature of the offense in this series. In game number 1, you have the Dodgers score 2 runs, and the D-backs score 2 runs, and then the Dodgers score 3 runs, and then the D-backs scored a run in the bottom of the second, then the D-backs scored two more runs in the bottom of the third. Like, the back and forth nature that we've seen in these games have been incredible. Game number 2, Dodgers score 3 runs, then D-backs scored 4 runs in the bottom of the first. Like, this series has showed you that these two offenses are going to be battling in the postseason. I don't think we're going to see the Dodgers that we saw last year in the playoffs where their offense did nothing. I think whoever pitchers step up more, whether that's your rotation, whether that's your bullpen, whoever gets the better quality starts, whoever gets the relievers to come out and get the strikeouts in high leverage situations, like, that's what this series might come down to, because it feels like the best players in both lineups are going to be hard to stop. I'm confident in the Ohtanis, the Betts, and the Freemans, and the Teoscars, and the Will Smiths all having better postseason series than they had last year. Obviously, not all those guys were on the Dodgers, like the Ohtanis and the Teoscars, and Will Smith was fine in the postseason last year. It was the Betts and the Freemans that struggled. I think that Dodgers offense is going to be fine, but I also think that D-backs offense is going to be fine in the postseason. So I think this series was a great preview into seeing that this might be a battle of the wills and a battle of powerhouse offenses once we get to the postseason. It could be a back and forth nature every single game, and that would make for great entertainment. It would be a lot of fun to watch if you're a casual or a non-D-backs or LA fan. But as a D-backs fan, I would be so nervous. I would be so stressed out. I'd like it. I like what the D-backs did last year, where they won like every game in convincing fashion, where they had big blowouts, where they had big clutch wins. They just kept winning every game until they faced Philadelphia. That's the kind of postseason run I want for the D-backs this season as well. And I think the D-backs would beat the Dodgers in a postseason setting, but I can't deny the Dodgers are scary with the offense that we saw this past weekend. It's definitely elite, but the D-backs offense also showed us we can match wits with the Dodgers. We saw a great series so far from Eugenio Suarez, 6 RBIs, couple home runs already for Suarez. Corbin Carroll, 5 runs, 4 ribbies, 2 home runs, including inside the Parker. McCarthy has a hit or a run in every game so far. And if you go up and down the lineup, you can find a moment with everyone. Jock Peterson had a home run. Randall Grichuk had a home run. We've seen Bell have a big game. Gurriel as well. And so we've seen some incredible offense by the D-backs in this series, and it's good to see them match that offense of the Dodgers. So I don't think D-backs versus Dodgers will be the same as last year. If we get that matchup again this year, I think it's going to be a bloodbath between the two offenses going back and forth, and the last man standing might be the team to win once we get to the postseason, because the Dodgers offense looks so good, because the D-backs pitching has been a lot more shaky in the month of August, and that's what we'll discuss in segment number 2. But hey, if you're thinking about buying tickets to an upcoming D-backs game, then the best place to go, of course, is going to be Game Time. And right now, Game Time is going to be the place you want to go if you're going to Monday's game, D-backs versus Dodgers, because right now, for Labor Day, D-backs versus Dodgers on Game Time is going to be 50% off. I'm going to say it again. I just laid out how this game might determine who gets a first round bye in the postseason, and Game Time is going to let you go to the game for half off. Insanity. Game Time, the best place for last minute tickets, sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. I don't care what it is. They have this all-in pricing feature. When you toggle it on, you can see the total cost up front before you buy with no surprise fees at checkout. Get a panoramic view of your seat before you buy, and they also have the lowest price guarantee. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. All right. Let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, and let's discuss the D-backs rotation, because so far in the month of August, it has been a struggle, and I do not like the way the D-backs starters are looking right now, because I've talked about on this podcast, so I feel so good about how the rotation looks on paper. I look at every guy, any game, any pitching matchup, I'm like, dang, the D-backs are going to have at least someone out there that I feel good about, someone that's quality, whether it's Gallen, Kelly, Fott, Erod, Nelson. I'm like, whoever the D-backs are going to throw out is at least going to be a good starting pitcher and can definitely match up against anyone in Major League Baseball. But right now, the D-backs rotation is just pitching bad. It is not producing at the level that we would expect with the names that we just laid out. But right now, in the month of August, this D-backs rotation has been struggling big time, and it is a big concern and something to watch this final month of August, because as good as this D-backs offense has been, as much confidence as I have in this D-backs team actually doing something this postseason, if this rotation does not turn it around, this D-backs team is not going to go very far in the playoffs. Right now, this rotation is pitching like a bunch of Jordan Montgomerys, which might sound hyperbolic, might sound like I'm being dramatic and over-exaggeration, but you actually look at the numbers in the month of August for each D-backs starting pitcher, it's not that far off from what Jordan Montgomery was giving the D-backs this month. Monty, in the month of August, has a 5.11 ERA, a 5.11 ERA in 24.2 innings pitched, 4 starts, 5 games, right? Not good at all. 5.11 ERA. Zach Gallen, in 5 starts in the month of August, 27 innings pitched, a 4.94 ERA. Not that far off from what Jordan Montgomery has given you. Brandon Pfaadt, entering today's start, probably lowered his ERA, but entering today's start, Brandon Pfaadt in 5 starts, 28.1 innings pitched, 6.04 ERA. Now, that's probably going to go down a little bit because of today's start, but still a worse ERA than Jordan Montgomery in the month of August. Merrill Kelly, 4 starts, 21.1 innings pitched, 6.75 ERA in the month of August. And then Erod, 21.2 innings pitched, 4 starts in the month of August, 5.06 ERA. So really, Monty has a better ERA than Pfaadt and Gallen. He has a half point ERA worse than Erod, and basically a 1.5 worse ERA than Zach Gallen. Like, Monty is right there in the conversation for being the second best D-backs starter in the month of August, which is insane to say. If you're just going by ERA, you can make that argument. And that shows you how bad the rest of these D-backs starters have been. Ryan Nelson in the month of August, he's been solid. He's still producing. 3.19 ERA, 5 starts, 31 innings pitched. Like, we're at the point where there's more faith, more confidence in a Ryan Nelson than any other starter in this D-backs rotation. And I never thought we were going to get to a world where I would say that out loud and it would be true, but here we are. Ryan Nelson has been so good for the D-backs the last couple months, and now a serious question. If the D-backs rotation continues to pitch like this until the postseason, and Ryan Nelson continues to be the only guy giving D-backs quality starts, should Ryan Nelson start game one of the playoffs? Because right now, in terms of my confidence meter, it goes Ryan Nelson 1 and then probably Brandon Pfaadt number 2. I know I just mentioned how he had a really bad ERA this month, but should go down after today's start. 5.2 innings pitched, 3 earned runs, 10 strikeouts. I would have loved for Brandon Pfaadt to get the quality start. He just keeps hitting like some wall later in the middle innings, and he did it again. He had 10 strikeouts. He was really cruising Sunday's game, racking up a bunch of Ks. First pitch strikes on a bunch of dudes. Like, he looked really confident out there, but he also gave up 8 hits. And despite striking out a ton of people, there was also a lot of quality contact given up by the LA Dodgers. They were still taking advantage of the mistakes by a Brandon Pfaadt. And so the D-backs, right now, I feel the best about Ryan Nelson and Brandon Pfaadt, but that's not where we should be in September. Like, Nelson and Pfaadt should not be the two pitchers I have the most confidence in. I love Brandon Pfaadt. If he was the number 3 starter, I would not be mad at all. But at this point of the year in September, I should feel good about Zach Gallen. I should feel good about Merrill Kelly. I should feel good about the first major D-backs acquisition this summer. Erod, 4 years, $80 million. And right now, I don't know if I feel good about any of them. I don't even feel that great about Brandon Pfaadt right now. And I do wonder if, like a Kelly and a Zach Gallen, like, how healthy are they? Are they needing a more rehab time? Are they still trying to work back to the level of strength that they've had, earlier this season or last year? Like, I don't know where they are from a health standpoint as well. Feels like they're not exactly 100%, and I'm not sure if they should be continuing to pitch every 5th day if they're not 100%. The D-backs, medical staff has been very questionable this season with how we've seen them handle injuries. I mean, Ketel Marte, of course, he got hurt, came back, and they got hurt again. That happened with Zach Gallen as well. Like, the medical staff has been very questionable so far for the D-backs. That's one of the big reasons why I want that first round bye if I'm Arizona, because I just want to get these guys some rest entering the postseason. And so we're going to need a big Erod performance on Monday to really, put the D-backs in a potential path of winning the division and potentially taking home one of those first round byes. So Erod, going to need you to step up on Monday, which we'll preview in segment number 3. And if you want to bet on the D-backs taking down the Dodgers in Monday's game, and the place you'll want to go to wager that, of course, is going to be FanDuel, because you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll always be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com. Download America's #1 sportsbook. And of course, my favorite thing to do on FanDuel is the same game parlay. Give me the D-backs over when it comes to runs scored. Give me Jake McCarthy over on total bases, and give me the D-backs money line. When that 3-leg hits, it brings a big smile to my face. If you want a big smile on your face, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make a little wager today. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right. Let's get back into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. And let's talk a little bit about the belief meter, because typically on Sundays in the past, more first half of the D-back season, like those first 90 games, we did a panic meter, right? Discussing how we felt about the D-backs even making the postseason. That's where we were. D-backs few games below 500. We were scared. There was times where the meter was super low in terms of we had it at like I forgot, was a 3 like, oh, it's bad, or was a 3 like, oh, it's good? Wherever the scale was, I forgot how we already did the panic meter, but the scale used to lean more heavily to the D-backs missing the postseason than making it to the playoffs. And now we've retired the panic meter and turned it into the belief meter. A crazy transition for the meter here on the podcast. But now the meter stands for the belief that we have in the D-backs of potentially winning the NL West. And I want to put a pin in the meter today. Typically, we do it on Sundays, but because there's one more game in this series against the LA Dodgers, I want to wait one more day before we unveil the meter. I believe last time the meter was at a 6, and it could potentially move up or down depending on the score tomorrow, because I could tell you if the D-backs lose the game tomorrow, there's 6 games back of the Dodgers. I'm not going to be feeling good about them winning the NL West. So big game for the D-backs. So much on the line as we've detailed on this podcast. Another thing that's on the line, D-backs haven't had a tiebreaker against the LA Dodgers since 2018. It's been a minute since the D-backs have walked away from the regular season, saying they beat them head-to-head. Now, if the D-backs beat them on Monday, they won't technically own the head-to-head record. They would be tied on the season in terms of the head-to-head victories, which is kind of crazy. That tells you how evenly matched they've been this season. I'm going to look it up right now. And it also tells you about the new rule changes with the calendar, because you used to face these teams so much in a calendar year, and now you just don't face them as much. And I do like that a lot, because if you're playing 162 games, why are we not playing against every opponent in the sport? That never made any sense that baseball did that. So I do like that we get to see every team now. I just wish we got to do a home and home in the same season. I don't understand why the Yankees come here one year, then we go there the next year. Like, why can't we get a Yankee series here and a Yankee series there in the same calendar year? Hopefully that's the next step for Major League Baseball. But if the D-backs win tomorrow, 6-6 against the Dodgers this season, with the tiebreaker against them as well. So a big opportunity for the D-backs to really do something. And we got Erod on the mound against the LA Dodgers, and being a lefty, first time they get to see a lefty in this series, and potentially could be in the D-backs' favor with Ohtani being a lefty. Maybe that's the dude you actually want to slow down, with Freddie Freeman as well being a lefty. Like, maybe you feel better that 2 of the 3 best Dodgers are now a little bit more ineffective. Obviously, Mookie Betts now, right-handed batter, sets him up a little bit more against Erod, and both those guys used to play together in Boston, so maybe he knows a little bit thing or two from the scouting report. And of course, Teoscar Hernandez, also a righty. That's going to benefit him. Also, Will Smith. And so, yes, Erod being a lefty, it maybe slows down the Ohtanis and Freemans, but their lineup is still so stacked. I don't know how much is going to really affect it. But when you do look at Erod's numbers, he struggles against right-handed pitching, and he dominates the lefties. Lefties this season have 0 hits against Erod. They're 0 for 14. Meanwhile, righties this season batting .300 against Erod with an .867 OPS. And so for Erod, keep continuing to slow down those lefties, slow down the Ohtanis, slow down the Freemans, because if you could do that, you don't want to see the Mookie Betts start to get going and the Will Smith start to get going, because I'm confident those guys are going to show up on Monday with the series on the line going against a lefty starter. I'm not concerned at all with those guys having quality games on a Monday afternoon. But if you're Erod, you have to slow down the lefties in the Dodgers lineup. You've been doing such a good job of that all season, and you have to maintain it against Ohtani, against Freddie Freeman. You cannot let those guys get going. And then you also are not good against the righties like Mookie, like Will Smith. It cannot happen tomorrow if you're Erod. The other thing that you cannot allow to happen is you can't let the second half of the Dodgers lineup go off. That has been a little bit of a struggle through those first couple games for the D-backs. We saw the second half of the lineup really go off for the Dodgers. The Tommy Edmonds, the Rojas's, the Muncys of the world, the Gavin Luxes. Like, we can't let those guys have good games, because when you let those guys get on base, get cooking, and then all of a sudden you now put Ohtani and Betts with runners in scoring position and give them opportunities to drive guys home. That is the last thing that you would want if you're the Arizona Diamondbacks. And so please, Erod, do everything you can to slow down the lefties first. As we saw today, Ohtani struggled against the Arizona Diamondbacks. He is human, guys. 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. So if we could get a similar performance like that once again with Erod on the mound, that's step one to setting yourself up to win this game. And then step number 2, make sure you slow down the second half of that Dodgers lineup, because we cannot let the Tommy Edmonds of the world start to go off. And then with Gurriel out, I am curious to see what the D-backs do to replace him. Jack Flaherty's on the mound. He is a righty, and so I wonder if the D-backs just go with a Randall Grichuk to replace him. They just called up Jorge Barosa as part of the September call-ups. Would they do something funky with him and maybe just start him? You know, since Randall Grichuk is not getting that normal platoon situation, maybe they just put Jorge Barosa in the more disadvantageous situation. So curious to see what the D-backs do tomorrow with their lineup, with Gurriel going down, to see how they replace him with a righty on the mound and Jack Flaherty. But for the D-backs, I think it comes down to more of their starting pitching with Erod, how he attacks that Dodgers lineup. And for the D-backs, if they can get the win, huge for the rest of the season, really sets them up for potentially NL West and taking one of those first round buys. So go out there and get that series split tomorrow if you're the Arizona Diamondbacks. Now that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Doses.